What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Baseball Development Hub podcast. My name is Trevor Powers, and I am riding solo on this podcast again this week. We were going to have a guest this week, but had to rechange some plans. So that's okay because opening day is in full swing. College baseball is in the thick of the season. It was a great weekend of baseball to be able to look back on and talk some player development. So before we get into the content of today, make sure you smash that subscribe button to both the Baseball Development Hub channel as well as the Backside Ground Balls Media channel because it helps us continue doing what we're doing. With that being said, opening day was this past weekend, and it's so awesome when we're able to celebrate that as a baseball community and be able to just have wall to wall baseball combined with college baseball. There's a couple of things that stood out to me just watching this weekend, and I think it shows a little bit of the blend of the old school and new school that we've talked about, and how the pendulum is swinging back in player development in terms of it's not just always about the talent. It's not just always about how hard you can throw and how much bat speed you can create and how far you can hit a baseball. What I noticed this past weekend across baseball of all levels is it feels like the barrier for entry is higher, right? And I think what we've seen over the last 10 to 15 years, maybe even less, maybe more 5 to 10 years, is the barrier for entry was solely focused on talent and talent alone. How hard can you throw the baseball over the middle of the plate, right? It didn't matter whether you could command it to both sides of the plate. It didn't matter if you had four pitches. We were looking for guys that had the raw tools, whether it was in the college recruiting process or whether it was in professional baseball and those guys getting to the major leagues based on the success of being able to identify what they do really well and be able to consistently do it on the field through the minor leagues and ultimately in debuting. But it made for a lot of people that had watched the game for a really, really long time frustrated to see because it felt like strikeouts were up. It felt like defensive play was down. It felt like base running IQ and baseball IQ and throwing to the right bases and being able to defend the short game was gone, was just never going to happen again. And we were solely focused on these, as Dan likes to call it, cage match environments where it's pitcher v hitter. How hard can I throw it and how fast and how far can you hit it? Right. That was all it felt like baseball cared about for a stretch of time. And I think what we've realized is terms of in the private sector, I still think that is the main focus of a lot of people. I think that's the reality of it. And I do think to a large extent that I can understand where they're coming from. But I think that's the main disconnect that we've seen a lot in the baseball community is there's people that are coaching these athletes on the field, having to get them prepared to play and win baseball games on Fridays, Saturdays in professional baseball. And there was frustration because lower baseball IQ, lower ability to control the run game, lower ability to even care about anything outside of the pitcher versus the hitter and the cage session environment, and not really realizing that there's, multiple positions across the field and multiple different aspects of the game that can lead to winning and losing. And I think the people who were on the field with each individual athlete as a team, 35 guys, 25 guys, whatever the structure was, there was a lot of frustration that it felt like each of those individuals was only focused on their own impact in either pitcher or hitter settings. And I think that's what's been the biggest divide between old school versus new school is there's people in the old school realm who are very anti-tech and anti, I don't want to say player development, but anti-obsession over our main focus is how do we get these players better as quickly as possible. And better typically means how do we get them to throw harder? How do we create more strength and bat speed to get them to hit the ball harder? How do we get them to hit the ball off the ground more consistently because home runs win us ball games and all of those things and frustrations that came from the old school group. And the new school group was like the proof is in the pudding, right? The money behind these guys between an NIL or a professional baseball are to the guys that are bigger, faster, stronger, right? And being able to identify those guys and get them to maximize those strengths is going to get them further along in their career, get them to maximize their skill set and strikeouts be damned and errors be damned and all of these different scenarios and throwing to the wrong base and defending the short game. don't really care because he's going to hit 25 bombs in a college season, or he's going to push, 300 batting average in professional baseball because we're going to get them ironed out. And there was a huge disconnect. And I always felt, as somebody who was very new school in terms of the player development and the use of tech and all of those different avenues that have been so impactful at the Major League Baseball. And we don't give enough credit to how much better the athlete has become across the last 5 to 10 years. I was always somebody that always leaned towards that new school, but I could understand where maybe some older school people, or when you went out to a college baseball game and you watched even an SEC team's inability to hold runners at first base or second base, inability to defend the run game, bad defensive positioning in scenarios that I know Division III coaches would have a joystick on their players to make sure they're playing the right position because they've taught them and they've educated them, because it matters more than the raw skills and the raw talents. There were definitely moments where I'd sit there and be like, I get it, right? If I was somebody and I was specifically looking for those imperfections from the athletes and the play on the field, you can see it every time you watch a baseball game. And I guarantee, as I get through this podcast, there are going to be things that you could point out from even last night, today, whenever you're listening to this, in professional baseball, where guys are doing things that are just don't make a ton of sense, right? Like Vladimir Guerrero on Saturday. Not only did he make a bad decision to challenge a pitch and a strike call in a scenario where it was 2-1 and he was trying to get to 3-1 and count leverage, and it was a strike in the first inning and it was just a bad decision. He then got on first base and tried to go first to third and made the third out at third. I completely understand that there might be some people who played baseball in the 70s, 80s, or coached baseball in the early 2000s who are mad about something like that. I'm somebody who leans on the side of aggressiveness, so I don't really hate it early in the game. You want to get a leg up on your competition, so you push going first to third, but wasn't really a close play. In professional baseball, runners from second, there's no pass ball in play. Runners from second typically score on a knock compared to the difference between runner on third with 2 outs. It's kind of the same scenario. So I can understand the frustrations that maybe come out. And there are definitely still moments where, if you're really looking and honing in on these imperfections of the quote unquote game today, you're going to find it. But I say all that to say, I truly believe the pendulum is swinging back based on what I'm seeing in terms of professional baseball, in terms of how teams are playing, in terms of making sure you're building a team that knows how to win, and these high baseball IQ players, and specifically these young players, which we're going to discuss, who are have a higher level of these imperfections that people complain about, and just being able to balance between what was formerly the arms race in player development, the arms race in chasing those outputs and those variables that we thought for a very long time, and that do evidently, if you want to argue with me, you'll argue with a brick wall, do evidently improve the baseball player. Exit velocity, average fastball velocity, spin rates, all of those things, launch angle in terms of the window, making sure if it's between 10 and 30, there's no argument that those help a baseball player be better. But I think what a lot of people are realizing is, when you're building a team, you have to maximize the raw skills of every player and combine it with a barrier of entry, which I'm talking about, of baseball IQ, doing the right things, knowing how to run the bases, and all the things like that. Back to the Vladimir Guerrero situation real quick. Coach Schneider with the Blue Jays, manager of the Blue Jays, Vladimir Guerrero can get away with a couple of those things because he's one of the top 10 hitters in the world at this point in time. That doesn't excuse it. That doesn't mean as a young player you should think you're better than making those mistakes. But what I'm trying to explain is that for that barrier of entry, it's basically a cost benefit analysis, right? The more talented you are, the more we can let you get away with bad defensive reps, bad base running reps, all of those things. Because, like, Juan Soto provides $700 million worth of value on the field to the Mets, whether he can play left field or not. As long as Juan Soto gets 300, 450 at-bats in a season, he's going to be in a position to contend for an MVP, contend for a batting title, and it doesn't matter if he's not a great defender and he occasionally doesn't throw to the right base and he kind of has a noodle of an arm, because his most valuable asset is the talent in his bat. But the other guys, and where you're starting to see roster construction at all levels, major league and high school baseball, round into form, is those 7 through 8, 7, 8, 9 guys, those fourth and fifth starters, those relievers that are lower leverage, those utility guys and defensive replacements, and the guys you stack in AAA are just better in terms of their baseball IQ. So I think organizations are really starting to realize that there needs to be more value in these guys that know how to do the right things, because their margin for error and their margin for mistakes are slimmer, right? So when you put them in, they're not going to make costly mistakes like booting a ball that they should easily handle that results in 7 extra pitches from your pitcher, an extra batter or two of pressure, having to go to a guy in the bullpen quicker, mayhem, you're down 2 runs because that guy couldn't make a routine play. There's more valuable value in that guy that's going to have that spot start occasionally, in just being able to know what you're going to get. And I saw that across baseball. I think that when I was watching specifically the Cardinals versus the Tampa Bay Rays, there was a couple things that stood out. Joe Boyle is a guy that stuff wise is just electric. 97, nasty slider. When he hones it in, it's dominant stuff, right? Just dominant stuff. And it's raw skill. But there were two things that stood out early in his outing that I think kind of lends to this perspective. One, he backed up a lot of sliders. He was missing a lot of location, and the Cardinals made him pay for it very, very fast. There was a lot of loud contact and things like that. So the fact that you just throw 97 and the fact that you just have elite spin rate on your breaking ball doesn't mean that you're going to be guaranteed to get outs, right? Doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to be a high level starter in the big leagues. Doesn't mean any of those things. When you look at the elite starters in the big leagues, they have elite stuff. Paul Skeens, Tariq Skubal, all of those guys. But they also know how to pitch. And that's what makes them truly, truly elite, not flash in a pan guys that have one good season, one bad, and just teeter on the seesaw each and every year. No, these guys that are truly elite, they can command it into a soda can from 60 feet, 6 inches away, while also having elite stuff. And that's what truly makes a Cy Young annual contender each and every year. And I think that's what you're seeing with a guy like Boyle, where the reality is that like he's going to run into inconsistencies. For any Tampa Bay Rays fans or anybody who's going to watch that org on a day-to-day basis, he might go out there and punch out 10 and 7 innings. He might, but he also might go out there and go get through an inning and a third and give up 7 and tax your bullpen. There is value in the talent, but there's an understanding that it's limited in its floor mainly, but also the ability to reach that ceiling, because if he's not commanding it that day, it's not very good, it's not very pretty, and it puts everybody around you in a precarious position. The other thing, and I'm not here to torch Joe Boyle. I think he's a really good pitcher, and I think that the Rays do a fantastic job of identifying these guys. The Cardinals had something early on him that allowed them to steal second twice, and then ultimately we had JJ Weatherholt steal in the first inning, Bleeder with 2 outs, run scores, huge difference in the game, huge difference getting up early and being able to deliver that first blow to your opponent. He was slow to the plate and he wasn't controlling the run game, and all of these different factors that come into play. And it's just one of those things that I think it's the epitome of player development balancing between team dynamics and needing to identify that guys that are able to just do both, right? And Joe Boyle is a guy who's going to pitch in the big leagues because of the elite stuff that he has, and he's very impressive in terms of that. But those two things end up adding a run to your ERA a year, because if you let guys steal second base with a form of frequency, singles turn into doubles, walks turn into doubles, and those are high impact batted balls, and you're just letting guys get into scoring position more frequently because you're slow to the plate, because the only thing that you truly care about is getting the guy out. And that's, again, the one-on-one matchup where he's really good at that, but there's so many different exterior things that go into play. And so being able to look across baseball and realize that some of these teams specifically are identifying ways to combine the two, right? And again, understanding the Tampa Bay Rays, who are a great player, I identifiers. They're great in player development, one of the best, and they find market inefficiencies and they do a great job like that. But when you're a smaller market team, the reality is you're going to have to sacrifice on something. And I completely agree with the fact that I would rather miss on talent and talent alone than miss on high baseball IQ. I can find high baseball IQ guys, right? I can find guys that don't strike out. I can find guys that play good defense. I can find guys that run the bases. You don't find talent growing on trees in market inefficiency. Those guys get to free agency and they really make a big buck. So I think, but it's an interesting balance because the Cardinals have completely leaned into the starter they roll out there is 91 to 93, sinking it, change up, spinning it. And is his stat line that good? No, but he's going to go out there. He's going to log them 150 or so innings, and he's going to throw enough strikes, and he's going to take the ball every fifth to sixth day, and he's going to be able to go out there and at least give you what you need, right? What you think you need in terms of a fourth or fifth starter reliability. There's not this ebb and flow. Some weeks he gives us an inning, and some weeks he gives us 7 or 8 and punches out the world. Gives us 5 every week, gives up 4 earned, couple bombs, 3 strikeouts. Our defense engaged. He throws strikes. We get through it fast. Our offense got to pick us up that day, right? We don't have a true ace and the ability to go out there and do that. So again, it's about identifying what these teams do. And when you truly look at what the Blue Jays did specifically last year and what they did really well, it was the ability to balance that. As I mentioned, circling back to Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and his base running is like, that's an elite talent of a baseball player. He's an unbelievable player. He's one of the best, young players in our sport. He just signed for a boatload of money to stay in Toronto. And the reality is like, that's a superstar. So you take your superstar and you combine him with an Ernie Clement. You combine him with an offensive identity that doesn't swing and miss as much, that bears down with 2 strikes, that will move a runner on the short game. But guess what? When they move a runner on the short game and they get a guy into scoring position, guess who's trotting up after him? Vladimir Guerrero Jr., George Springer, who hit 34 home runs last year, right? Like these guys that are really dominant even later in their career with a guy like George Springer, and these guys that are borderline high end players combined with role players that do things really well with a starting rotation that has studs across the board. They go and throw money at Dylan Cease, add him to the mix. That's a little bit more on the talent side. Maybe they felt in the World Series last year they lacked in the talent department on the mound, which I probably agree to a certain extent of just like having a guy, especially with late career Scherzer, go out there and just shut down an elite lineup. Cease can do that. Now, Cease might end the year with a 4.2 ERA, but he can do that at any moment. He can go out there and he can punch out the world. And again, it comes back to, as we see in many walks of life, the pendulum has a tendency to swing. And it swings back at some point, and we're probably going to cross over the threshold where some orgs, and maybe this is the Cardinals, some orgs lean too much in the old school of like, we need guys who know how to play the game, that don't strike out, that do all these things really well. And I think the reality is that it's a balance. Not everybody is the Dodgers who just have money to throw at these guys that do everything really well. And the Mets, kind of the same scenario. It's like, oh, Juan Soto doesn't strike out. He walks a ton, and he's also just the best hitter in the world. Let's just throw 700 million at the problem. Francisco Lindor, elite defender, elite bat, switch hitter. So there's no platoon risk. Strong arm, knows the game, runs the base as well. Go throw money at him, right? Let's bring him in and let him just be him, and we can afford that. Not everybody's able to do that. So when you look at building your team, you need to have elite players at the top that are just flat out superstars, right? If you're going to win in this league at any level, you need elite talent at the top. You need to coach and maximize that talent to know what to do when they need to do it, right? To throw to the right bases, like the simple things, throw to the right bases, know when to go first to third, know when not to go first to third, good secondary leads, like little things, be able to just basically defend the short game of like throw to the right base, like don't mess those things up. And this is all levels, right? Like now I'm blending in a little bit of college because most of those pro guys, like catch play for them and throwing to the right bases is rudimentary, just elementary for those guys, even the guys that quote unquote struggle at that level. So you need to be able to coach them up to an extent where their talent doesn't overweigh their misgivings in terms of player baseball IQ and those mistakes. Then you need your middle of the roster to be a little bit of both. Your dogs in the box that don't strike out a ton, but also provide some form of thump, right? Maybe a guy that, or maybe your balance is a guy that's all thump and then another guy that's all contact and no thump, or a guy that's all defense and no bat, or a guy that's all bat and no defense, and being able to balance that. And then as you round out your roster, again, a couple of those high ceiling guys aren't going to hurt you, especially in the bullpen, because if those guys have a good week and they're dialed in the strike zone, they're going to be elite and just dominate their competition. But the reality is you also need guys that are reliable, because when your superstar goes down, do you want guys that, are basically sub replacement level because they caught a cold 1 week or 1 month or one bi-monthly? Or do you want the guy that's like, hey man, he might not provide elite talent, output, triple slash line, run production. He might not ever reach that ceiling of that, but he's going to provide us something of value over these next 6 weeks while this person's on the IR, or this person's struggling, or we had to move this person to center field and they fill in, and those kind of values. And again, it's where, as talent evaluators, as roster constructors, as all of those things, it matters a ton. It really does matter a ton. And being able to identify those guys to fill out your roster the right way and coach them up enough is important. And in college baseball as well, which obviously we're more connected in, I think that's what you see. I've had this theory for a while that you'll see a lot of the talented teams lose in a regional. I'll just use one an example. Last year, we had Florida go to the Coastal Carolina Regional, and obviously that Coastal team ended up making the national championship. So it's not like they were playing a bad team. But I don't think anybody even in that program would argue that Florida is more physically gifted and physically talented than we are, right? More pro bodies, more pro velocity arms, more pro batting practice where they're launching balls into the next zip code. Well, game one, Florida plays against East Carolina and just can't control the short game. Bad positioning on a play, bases loaded, 2 outs, 2 strikes, left-handed hitter up. We have a third baseman on the grass. Just like, and of course, the ball, 75-mile-per-hour ground ball, gets right outside of his reach. That stuff doesn't happen with well-coached teams. It's just the reality of the scenario. That's what I saw. I was there, and I pointed that out to Dan when we were watching the game. I was like, look at that third baseman, 2 strikes, 2 outs. And to make it even worse, the kid fouled off a 2-strike pitch and he stayed there. Nobody caught up on it. That's bad coaching. That's bad baseball IQ. That third baseman could have hit 20 home runs that year. It doesn't matter because that made a huge difference in a regional. So we'll see these talented teams lose in regionals. But why do we continue to see the best power rated teams win national championships? Because power rating really is a talent IQ and talent accumulation of prospects, because they're well coached enough, right? So when you take talent and you take level ish coaching, right, where these guys at LSU, at Arkansas, at these programs like that, you combine those two, they're very hard to beat. So typically when these teams get to Omaha, if they've gotten that far, they're probably pretty well coached, right? Tennessee is an example that comes to mind. LSU the last few years. These teams, when they get to Omaha, like their barrier for entry in terms of baseball IQ and making the right decisions, running the bases and playing catch and doing those little things, they're probably good enough, right? Well, then talent is going to outweigh any coaching at that level, right? If there is a high enough barrier to entry on coaching and doing the little things right, talent is going to smother any even greatly coached team, right? You could do everything right. You could run the short game. You just get stuffed in a locker, right? You just get to the point where you can't do what needs to be done in terms of the physical output that those guys are able to bring. So you've seen this in college baseball where it really matters who your coach is. Like, it doesn't matter how good of a recruiter you are. It does matter a lot how good of a player developer you are, and being able to make sure your guys prepare accordingly and things like that. But the reality is like, if you just accrue talent and you think that you're just going to roll the gloves out and go beat somebody up, you better be well enough coached, because there are teams across the country. And what makes the college baseball postseason so fun is that there's teams across the country. You're going to run into a team that only plays the short game, right? They play at a field in a cold weather park, in a cold weather environment. They're fun, run, put pressure on you. And you see it every June, late May and June. SEC programs have no idea how to cover the bunt game. Why? Why do they not? Because it's just not a priority in that conference. They don't see it very often. Then you get in the postseason, and one team who does it ad nauseum just can take advantage of that group of players. But when you get to Omaha, you watch again, go back to one of the most historic plays, like Trey Morgan being able to defend the short game, the him coming hard on the squeeze, glove flip, catcher, bang bang play at the plate, out. Biggest difference in that Paul Skeens versus Rhett Lauder historic college game. That's just an elite baseball awareness play from an elite player who also happens to be uber talented and uber athletic. That is the epitome of the difference between these well coached, even ACC teams and these truly powerful SEC teams, and why, when you get to that point in the season, talent is going to win out. But that's why you see so many upsets early in the postseason when college teams are able to take advantage of just badly coached teams that don't know how to make the easy play, and they don't know how to make the right play, and all the things like that. So back to Major League Baseball and opening day, and it was a really fun and good weekend, and there's nothing better than especially day baseball and just the beauty of the murmur of a crowd and just everybody getting outside, sun kissed stadium, and all those things that come from it. The other thing that stood out in my big takeaway is, and it comes to this player development and the future and the pendulum swinging back and being really in a honey hole of unbelievably talented baseball players that are going to take over this sport over the next few years, is the young talent. And we saw this with JJ Weatherholt hit his first home run from, and another guy from the 2024 class. Carson Benj from with the New York Mets from Oklahoma State. He hit his home run in his debut, and another 2024 draft prospect. And that combines with Jack Caglianone, Chase Burns, Nick Kurtz, and all those guys that have already debuted. Travis Bazzana had a good World Baseball Classic. And that's just to add on to the guys that have debuted from classes before. Paul Skeens, Jackson Churio, Wyatt Langford, Jackson Holiday, even guy who's a little bit older, and Gunnar Henderson. And my whole point in naming off those guys, because they all have something in common, at least in my mind, and it goes back to this player development pendulum, is they're all really, really talented, but they all do the little things really, really well, right? What truly makes Paul Skeens elite, truly makes Paul Skeens elite, is his ability to command the baseball. Is his stuff premium and elite? Yeah, if Paul Skeens threw 89, he wouldn't be as good of a prospect as or player as he is. But the reality is what makes him truly elite is the ability to do the little things well. What made Jackson Holiday such a high level prospect coming up was that exact thing. There's a ceiling here that we think he can continue to grow into, but he does the little things really, really well. He makes a ton of contact. He knows how to go the other way with the baseball. He has really good barrel awareness. And what you've seen with him is he struggled because he doesn't have enough of that raw skill and raw strength. And I think it's just a matter of time before he breaks out and starts to look like Gunnar Henderson has, because that's the same thing. Gunnar Henderson is an elite power guy who also happens to have elite bat to ball skills and barrel awareness. And he's able to play up the middle and play shortstop as a premium athlete. And so it's the game is in really, really good hands with these young guys. And you're starting to see major league teams rush these guys to the big leagues because they're just more ready than they've ever been before. And that's just awesome. And it shines a huge light on the player development of this sport, but also how good the awareness has that it's both sides of the coin, right? Like Nick Kurtz is a gold glove caliber first baseman. JJ Weatherholt is an elite base runner. He's an elite bat to ball guy. He's an elite hitter. And then he also can go big fly to center field in a park when it's cold that is big in Busch Stadium. You have Kevin McGonigal, who does everything elite. He hits for power. He hits the ball hard. He makes a ton of contact. He doesn't swing at pitches out of the zone. Oh, and he also plays up the middle defensively and is a good defender up the middle. And those guys are now the future of the sport. Carson Benj is a guy that I loved during the draft process in 2024 and I thought he was the steal of the draft, and getting him at when they did, the Mets did at 17th overall or 19th overall, whichever it was. Just rush him to the bigs. He's ready. He makes a ton of contact. He hits the ball hard and in the air. He also can play a really good right field with a strong arm and plays a good corner outfield and has experience playing center field. Get him up there. Let's see what he's capable of, because again, these aren't these wildly gaps between floor and ceiling from these prospects that are debuting. These guys are so well rounded and so refined in their ability to play the game of baseball that the reality is that they are good enough to step right in and be impact talents at 20, 21, 22, 23, and just immediately get in there and be names that we should all recognize and names that we should know. And that doesn't mean progress is always linear, right? Like, it doesn't mean that these guys always come and perform. We've seen Caglianone struggle in his first year with the Royals, which it kind of comes when you go to his evaluation process. Like, there was a lot of chase and he swung at everything. In the big leagues, that gets exposed, right? Because guys are just able to expose them. You have Chase Burns, who struggled with inconsistencies, missing over the middle of the plate, missing off the plate, like those kind of things. Like, these guys will round into form. But I think the reality is that the reason why youth is so good in this sport is because we've really just struck a balance in player development of like, are we going to obsess with the tech and the resources and getting these guys to be the best physical athletes they can be? Yeah, and we should, right? And we 100%, 150% should. And if you're a college or you're a professional org and you're not embracing these things, you're getting left behind. But that doesn't mean that the other parts of the game, the finer parts of the game, the finer edges that can win or lose you a game, not only in July, but most importantly in October, and win or lose you 4 or 5 games through the season that could make you miss a playoff spot. Those things are now becoming more and more important for these guys to be able to go out there and perform. And again, you've just seen it. The sport is in great hands. And also, as you connect it back further, the 2025 draft class wasn't very good. That's why you saw a lot of young players go. The 2026 class, like, there's going to be a lot of guys that are going to push that fast track to the big leagues. The Rock Chalowskis, the Von Lackeys, the AJ Gracias, the Chris Hakopians, these guys that are playing in college baseball, Jackson Flores, they are more ready now than most guys are. And the 2026 class has an opportunity to be special. And that's not even mentioning the high ceiling potential of some of these high school guys that are going to be selected in this year. And again, it just shows that there is so much more of an emphasis on these young players being able to do what needs to be done in a player development sense to help your team win outside of the 1v1 of pitcher versus hitter. Outside of that, there's multiple ways to help your team win. It doesn't mean you're going to get the biggest paycheck in terms of free agency, draft value, any trade value, any of that. No, not necessarily. But does it mean you have an opportunity to continue to provide value depending on where your talent hits that roadblock? 100%. And the guys that have the talent through the roof, like a lot of these young players and a lot of our superstars in the sport, they also are now possessing just an elite ability to blend that old school of like, this guy, you need to be able to command your fastball. Well, these guys know how to command your fastball, right? You need to be able to not strike out with a runner on third in less than 2 outs. These guys don't just go out there and swing and miss at a 40% clip. They understand two-strike approach. They understand how to help their team win. They know how to move runners when they need it to be done. And like JJ Weatherholt this weekend is just a great example. The guy is an unbelievable baseball player. He was unbelievably coached at West Virginia and maximized his skill set there. And he just continues to play like college baseball JJ Weatherholt of like, I'm going to steal second here because I can. And I picked up a tip on the pitcher. And a guy like Joe Boyle, who throws 97 and a good catcher behind the dish who can throw out a ton of runners, they don't even have a chance because he just picked up on something in his high baseball IQ, just earned the Cardinals an extra base, which can be the difference between you do that once a week, you go from a wild card spot to winning your division. You go from outside the playoff to looking in. You go from division leader to leading, being first place in the National League, right? Like those are the margins that these players nowadays and these orgs are really identifying. And again, I mentioned a little bit. We'll wrap this up here again. Like I mentioned, we kind of had a guest, and we wanted to dive into some different stuff, and I just kind of threw this together last minute as I was watching the game, and really coming to terms with what I was seeing on a day-to-day basis. And I think the reality is that the sport is in great hands, right? College baseball, these guys are being coached up pretty good, they're being developed in terms of talent, and they're getting opportunities to compete. And I think as I talk through this, I think it just emphasizes the importance of what we had talked about so long ago. As we're talking about getting rid of high schoolers in the draft and shortening the draft and maybe getting guys who are drafted on college campuses. College baseball is still the best place to develop, right? And it's about picking the right program. I sat here and I talked negatively about an SEC program that didn't know how to seemingly coach defense. Well, there are a lot of good programs out there that have head coaches that are obsessed with the finer details of playing defense and defending the run game. And there are prospects out there that, even if they're good enough to go 10th overall in this year's draft, could really benefit from learning from those coaches. I mean, there's Division III coaches that I would trust with educating a lot of these players on their baseball IQ, because they're just unbelievable savants of the sport, right? And being able to learn from them is super impactful to these players' careers to help them in the long run. And so I think, again, college baseball, when you look at the teams that win and you look at how they win, it's a combination of talent and being well coached. And as we're going to see a continued increase in these players making it to campus that would have typically been drafted, I think you're only going to see these guys be more major league ready because they're educated on the finer parts of the game, and they're able to then go out there and perform and help their team win, even if it is in a smaller, more minuscule way than you would typically expect. And I think that's a really important part of understanding that this game, as much as we want to sit on social media and argue back and forth, the reality is that the game is healthier than it's ever been. We now have a balance of new school tech and player development resources that maximize the abilities of these guys to be able to throw 100 miles per hour. But these guys are now understanding that 100 miles per hour isn't as useful if I can't throw it where I want it. And being able to understand that is what allows you to create the Paul Skeens of the world, is what allows you to create the Tariq Skubals of the world, the JJ Weatherholts of the world, the Nick Kurtz of the world. All of those guys are products of well coached, well refined, high baseball IQ players that were also developed physically to be beasts. And when you balance that and you have a roster full of guys that are both of those, the sky is the limit. The sky is the limit. And it's really fun to watch right now. And everybody should enjoy the state of baseball instead of arguing back and forth about right and wrong and why the game stinks. Enjoy the state of baseball as it is, because it really is the best it's ever been. And with that, make sure you subscribe to the channel. A little bit of a quicker episode, but I can only talk for so long and not get exhausted and winded and stare at myself on the screen. So make sure you subscribe to both the Baseball Development Hub podcast, Baseball Development Hub YouTube channel, Backside Ground Balls Media. Follow on all social channels. Reach out with any questions if anybody has it. We would love to start answering some questions on the podcast, any topics you want us to explore. We're always here listening and wanting to talk player development in the baseball space. And that will do for this episode of the Baseball Development Hub